Hello and welcome back. Same old podcast, new location. I'm in Buffalo, New York at a co-working place. So that's why I have the world's most boring backdrop. Oh my God, I miss my paintings.
I know, usually it's way more exciting.
Way more exciting. So if you're seeing this podcast for the first time and you're on YouTube watching me, don't judge me by my backdrop. This isn't my doing. But we are here with the same two awesome co-hosts ready to dive into another clinical topic to help y'all feel better. So Amy, you want to introduce today's topic?
Yeah, we're going to be talking about skin, like the skin-gut connection, all that jazz. Yeah, we'll be covering like a variety of skin conditions. But yeah, I'm excited. There's been a couple that I think we'll touch on maybe briefly that I've experienced personally, and then we're going to be talking about like eczema, psoriasis, which I haven't had as much experience with. Have you had those? We didn't really cover like that
personally or clinically.
Yeah, like have you struggled with any like psoriasis, eczema personally?
No, and I'll say I'm not a good person to talk about these topics, maybe from that perspective, because I have great skin. I've always explained health and like flare-ups and setbacks to people in the context of the weak link in the chain versus the strong links in the chain, right? So like, if you yank on a chain a million times, it's going to be the weak link that breaks and shows the weakness in that chain. And the strong ones are going to be totally fine. So for me, if I get symptoms, like if I'm not taking care of myself, if I slack off on my diet, if I'm not sleeping, I'm not managing my stress well, typically my symptoms are going to present more with like gut-based symptoms. In the last 10 years or so, it would be more constipation. But back in the day, it was more like bloating, abdominal pain, abdominal distension, diarrhea, like SIBO-y symptoms back when I had IBS. And also I would say brain sort of stuff, just like low energy level, insomnia, trouble sleeping, that sort of stuff. So those are the weak links, so to speak, for me. And it's okay. I'm not judging it. We all have them. But for me, I think my skin is one of my really strong links that almost never shows any sign of weakness. I'll maybe get like a single pimple and then it's easily resolved within a couple of days. So I'm I'm hashtag grateful and hashtag blessed for my skin. But I know you were saying that your skin got kind of PO'd when you were healing your gut and restricting your diet a lot, right? Do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I definitely had more acne. So historically, through my teen years, I really didn't have much acne outside of maybe just a couple pimples here or there that would come up, but nothing crazy. But then I started to get more acne like in young adulthood. So maybe like 20, around when I was 20 to 21, I started getting a little bit more acne like around the chin area. And it kind of got worse. And then some of the gut stuff got worse. So there was sort of some simultaneous stuff going on. But it was interesting because I remember using my skin as like an example of like, oh man, my gut's so messed up because look, everything that's happening inside the body is affecting everything external. It's sort of the messaging you hear in the wellness space, right? It's like, oh, it's just a reflection of everything going wrong inside the body. And I think a lot of times in the gut health space, it's like a microbiome issue. It's reflective of your microbiome being imbalanced.
And leaky gut.
Right, and leaky gut. So again, to me, it was like, ooh, this is evidence. But the interesting thing, I will say, my acne got so much worse when I was restrictive, which was interesting because I thought, well, hell, it should be so much better. I'm eliminating.
Maybe you're cutting out the bad foods, right?
I'm eliminating gluten and dairy and all these inflammatory
foods. You're starving
foods.
the SIBO. You're healing the leaky gut.
Yeah, I think for me, that diet at that particular point in time, there could be a number of reasons, but was very low carb, or much lower carb than I need. I don't think it was like very low carb, but it was probably like 75 to like 100 grams of carbs, which typically, again, now I probably need 200 to 250 grams to feel like optimal. So it was well below where I think I thrive. I was eating a lot of fat, and a lot of like saturated fats, like coconut oils. Like I was relying on like a lot of fat to fill calories, which again, I don't necessarily think my skin loved. And then again, my diet was really limited. So you start wondering about nutrient deficiencies and things like that can affect the skin. I tend to be someone that's sensitive to my vitamin A status, which we'll talk about, because I have another skin issue, which is Keratosis Polaris. It's like chicken skin on the arms. For me, again, like vitamin A always resolves KP. It's like seems very related to my vitamin A status. I don't think that every single person, vitamin A is at the root of KP, but for me, it seems to be the case.
Isn't it associated with celiac disease also?
Yeah, I think again, there's like a heavy genetic component. I think that there's definitely like if there is some inflammation gut wise, I think, you know, there potentially could be a link. But yeah, KP again to me seems very associated with vitamin A. But during that time with my diet being off, my acne was terrible. I wish I still had like pictures, because sometimes I'd take pictures and be like, holy hell, like how did this happen? Go from like this, where I thought my skin was not great, because I typically had clear skin. I was like, oh man, went from this where I thought it was terrible before, and now it's way worse. And it was very frustrating to me because I thought, well, what the hell? I'm doing everything right, quote unquote right. What everyone's telling me would fix my gut. And in reality, I think I made my gut health much worse and my overall health much worse. Just because, again, I think that messed with my hormones. It stressed my body out. I was having deficiencies, which of course your gut's not going to like that. So, yeah, that period of time I had really bad acne. Then like it slowly got better, I think, once I shifted my strategy and started like optimizing my diet more. And it was kind of a slow shift. Skin takes a while to change and like turnover and things like that. And I think hormones take a little bit of time to change. I
remember on the topic of hormones briefly, your hormones were affected enough that your T3 was low. Like
my T3 was low for like at least a couple years, and like outright low. So out of range. So I think my
the LabCorp range.
Right. My free T3 was falling maybe at like 1.9 or 2.0. It was kind of hovering right at the 2.0. So like right below the threshold typically. I think the threshold now might be like 2.2 or 2.3, somewhere in there. But that's like where my T3 hung out, was very consistent for a while.
And the thing about hormones, I don't remember off the top of my head if you had like menstrual and like
I didn't have a period
hormone.
I didn't have a period for a while. So again, clearly my body was stressed.
Yes. And so there's other hormone stuff going on too. But I was going to say, even if nothing else, we could use the jacked up T3 as a proxy, because all of the hormones talk to all of the hormones. Mm-hmm. So like thyroid hormone talks to estrogen. Estrogen talks to testosterone, which talks to insulin, which talks to glucagon, which they all chit chat with each other and they all interact with each other all day. So if one hormone is a mess, there's some likelihood that you're like pulling on the string of that spider web, right? Again, it's not to say, oh, you're totally fucked if you have this, like one hormone's out of whack, your whole endocrine system is destroyed. But again, it's that idea of a spider web, and you pull on one quarter of the web and everything else has to shift and compensate and move just a little bit to make up for that. So yeah, I think especially with the acne, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if there was a strong hormone component, which was then tied to nutrition because you were underfueling, decreasing, like dropping carbs like crazy. And you were probably deficient in at least a few vitamins and minerals, like just taking a stab here. Yeah. And then your stress chemistry was probably through the roof too.
Yeah, for sure. I was a total mess during that period of time. And I think you're right. And again, like the hormonal collaboration makes sense, right? It's like the body's trying to budget. It's like whenever you go into budget mode, there's going to be all sorts of weirdness with hormones because, okay, first off, the body doesn't want you to have any babies if you're in budget mode. So there goes your period. Your body's going to want to try to downregulate fuel or fuel burn. So it's going to start shutting down metabolic things like your thyroid
marathons
function.
for you.
Right. And then it's like, again, cortisol has to come into play a lot more to regulate your blood sugar because your carbs are low. So it's like all these things make total sense. But yeah, they're like, to me, it was disastrous for my overall body. My gut freaked out more doing these things. And then again, my skin definitely freaked out too. Gradually got better the more I nourished my body and as the hormones kind of shifted back into place. But that was a process. That took time. Even gaining weight back was very pivotal for that as well. This is something, again, I feel like we even mentioned maybe in one of the more recent recordings we did, but sometimes like people can be eating enough, but they need to gain back some of the weight that they've lost in order for their body to feel safe, which then helps hormones regulate. So trying to figure out like what weight you thrive at, I think is an interesting discussion because, again, trying to meet where that point is can help your body feel safe and hormones to regulate and everything to feel resilient.
That could be a really interesting discussion. Like if we could find a dietitian or somebody who specializes in more overt cases of disordered eating, like anorexia or something, if we could find somebody like that, I don't know how many of the people in our audience have a diagnosis of anorexia per se, but somebody who specializes in the world of disordered eating and works with people who are like on that level of disordered eating might be able to paint more of a picture there, because you're right. And so we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit because I think we're going to we recently got together and recorded some live episodes for you guys together in the same room. I went to Cincinnati, but I think we're going to make those episodes like $199 and $200 since, it's like a big deal. So it'll be slightly out of order, but what we had talked about in those episodes, I think, was this idea of like the starving dog or the starving child in a Sarah McLachlan commercial, right? In the arms of the angel. Oh my God, Sarah, stop. But it's those commercials. You can't take that kid or that dog and just drop them into like Old Country Buffet and let them stuff their face. That would not be appropriate. That would be cruel because they're going to overeat and they're going to feel horrible and get a bellyache, or the dog's stomach is going to twist or something. So yes, it's important to begin the refeeding process in this case, but you have to do it smartly and you have to go at a pace that's like okay for that person to handle. But similarly, what you just said, if you take like the starving child from the Sarah McLachlan commercial and you feed them the appropriate amount of calories for like a week, do you think that their physiology is going to be totally normal and regulated in the span of 1 week? Like, I don't. If they've been starving for potentially years, they're going to have to really replenish and nourish their body for a long time. And you're going to have to send those safety signals to the vagus nerve for a long time for your vagus nerve to believe that you're actually safe. So again, it's this game of like, people will do the right thing and they'll do it for like a week or a month and then get kind of crabby and entitled like, I don't feel better, meh. Or you must be wrong, I really do have SIBO, or whatever it might be. And it's like, you got to do it for longer, man. Like you have to really show your vagus nerve that you're safe, and you have to really show your body that you have the appropriate amount of fuel coming in and you're like allowing your body to build back up to what it's supposed to be. And that could be the weight that you thrive at.
Yeah, it's a really good point because for me personally, I was probably heavily restrictive for maybe like 9 months to a year. So like we have patients that are restricting much longer than that.
Oh yeah.
And it probably took me a year to recover completely. Now again, like probably the first 6 months, maybe I made like 80% of the way there. But, there's still some lingering things that took a longer period of time to kind of regulate out. My sex hormones were one. Again, like that just took a little bit of time. And to be clear, I was sort of not hyper focusing on this to a degree. Like it wasn't like, oh, I need to refuel all of a sudden. There was an idea that I needed to start gaining weight, but I wasn't like really actively making that like number one priority or like number two priority. So it was a little bit more of a casual process for me. And I've had some clients more recently that have had some significant weight loss, some significant metabolic stress from weight loss. And similar to what you're saying, they get frustrated because they're like, well, I'm eating enough. And there's been a few cases where I've questioned whether they were because the weight wasn't budging. And there was, they were moving more. So I was like, okay, we might need to exceed where you're going or drop some of the movement so that you can actually start gaining. And I think, again, like that'll help your body sort of get back into rhythm again. Because again, it, like you said, it's going to take time for things to get back into rhythm if you had some significant weight loss and your body has just not felt safe for a while. And that's a good thing. You kind of want your body to be a bit skeptical of like, oh, she had 2 days of wild eating. Like, that's great. And we appreciate that to a point, but like, we're not changing things yet.
Yeah. It's way too soon.
All right. We're not trusting that you're going to give us what we need quite yet. It's kind of like the body is almost, like a lover scorn to a degree. Like, it's like, I don't forgive you yet. Or like, not that, that's probably the wrong word, but like, I don't trust you.
I don't believe
yet.
you.
You made a big mistake. And, I need like more proof that this is going to be a consistent thing to come back and start, showing you love again, or kind of like send you the right signals again. I think, again, the body can get a little bit like that, where it's like, hey, we're not trusting you. It's kind of like a friend that's broken your trust. You have to kind of prove with consistent action that you're trustworthy.
Well, it's like if you have, let's just be conservative. Let's say that somebody was eating a restrictive or otherwise shitty diet for a year, for 365 days.
Right.
Your body has 365 data points. Actually, times 3, right? Because 3 meals a day. Well, no, we're not going to get into that because people probably were skipping meals. Okay, let's just say 365 data points. And then you eat normally or you eat adequately for 7 days. 365 data points outweigh 7 data points. Right. And yet, like, heaven forbid if you have done this for longer. Like, I worked with a lady, I kid you not. And I don't know if she's listening right now. Hi, if you are. I'm not going to name names. But I worked with a lady in FODMAP Freedom not that long ago. She ate only chicken and rice and carrots for 10 years, Amy. 10 years.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
10. So, okay, 365 days times 10 years. And now here I've tried to coach her how to eat in a more like nutrient focused way, and like work on disordered eating and work on her food fears and like introduce foods and get nourished. And even in the span of FODMAP Freedom being 3 months, so what is that, like 90 data points, maybe? Okay, 90 data points kind of like pales in comparison to, what did I say, 10 years? Like, so what was that, 36,000 data points from 10 years of restriction? Like, it's going to take time, man.
Right. Yeah, it's such a good point.
I fear that we've strayed slightly from the topic of skin. I mean, we're dancing around it still, but I guess the point, the clinical takeaway here for this part is that let's kind of regroup on acne and Keratosis Polaris. So you were sharing Keratosis Polaris, very tightly associated with vitamin A for you in particular. And I think I would agree with that largely across the board. It's definitely worth trying out. And
there is research behind that too. There's a heavy link between vitamin A deficiency and KP. Now, again, I don't think it's every single person with KP. It's due to vitamin A deficiency. But, you know, like I said, it's worth looking at nutrients that are going to affect your skin positively anyway, like vitamin A being one of those things. If you're
maybe
struggling,
pair with a little bit of zinc, because they're buddies, they're BFFs forever. Right. Now, here's a question. You, as a fellow Caucasian person, do you have one of the VCMO SNPs that affect vitamin A conversion?
Oh, yeah. That's like my biggest, like when I look at my 23andMe data, that's like the one that's lit up in red whenever I plug it into any of the genetic genies or the genetic analysis software. Yes, I seem to be like in every one of those genes, just not a very good converter of beta carotene to active vitamin A. So again, like what we're talking about is there's genetic SNPs or variations where someone can't really convert plant-based beta carotene, which can be converted into vitamin A in the body. So like I don't do that conversion very well. So I actually need the preformed vitamin A, like the vitamin A that's active, in order for my body to use it as efficiently. Doesn't mean that I can't convert any beta carotene. It's just I'm not very good at it. I'm not as good as maybe the average or above average person.
Well, and one way you could kind of frame it is you would be a person who probably wouldn't do spectacular on a vegan diet. Right. Because you would be relying on plant foods to get all of your quote unquote vitamin A under the assumption that you're going to take that beta carotene from the carrots, the sweet potatoes, the squash, whatever. You're assuming that you're going to take that beta carotene and convert it into the real vitamin that you need. But some people, and this is fairly common amongst Caucasian people, which is why I commented on her race. Don't worry, people, I'm white too. It's fine. I can poke fun at her. But, you know, it's I think it's like 30 or 40% of us Caucasian people have at least one of the VCMO SNPs. Mm-hmm. And it really makes you wonder about all the people who go plant-based or vegan and like how many of them would do better if they just threw in a vitamin A supplement or like cod liver oil supplement or something like that to kind of compensate for that.
Yeah. And the weird thing for me is I notice like if I increase orange or like beta carotene rich foods, even like not like an insane amount, but if I eat more of them, I do get orange soles on my feet, orange palms, like very easily. Because I think my body's just like, we don't know what to do.
What do we do?
This is a hypothesis. Again, I don't know if this is validated by research, but my hypothesis is like, oh, my body doesn't really know what to do with the beta carotene.
There's a bottleneck, right?
So it just shoves it usually into like fat and things like that for storage. But again, like I can't really convert that. So I would get like, I have the funniest like PCP and he'd just be like, whoa, are you eating like tons of, carrots? And I'm like, I guess. Like for the longest time, I didn't really understand it until I looked at my genetic profile. It's the one gene that I would say is a little bit off the charts for me as being like, ooh, this is usually a flagged area. Yeah. So I kind of think maybe my body just shoves it into the palms and the soles of my feet and it just sits there.
And to be clear, it's not especially harmful when your body does that, but it's again suggestive of when you eat plant-based vitamin, quote unquote vitamin A from a plant-based source, you're not getting real vitamin A out of that because you're not converting it. And again, there's a bottleneck. I
have like Oompa Loompa hands, feet.
Okay, now you need to, like the whole month of October, you need to eat nothing but carrots. And then you get to Halloween and you could dress up as an Oompa Loompa and you won't need the gloves. You'll just, don't they wear white gloves? I'll have to go back and look at this now. I'm curious, but
yeah.
All right, you heard it here first, folks. Amy needs to be an Oompa Loompa for Halloween. It's decided. Yes.
Remember when we recorded in person? What was it? Pregnancy mouth? Now I have Oompa Loompa hands, pregnancy mouth. We have a lot of interesting things. Take a very attractive
picture for Amy Hollenkamp right now.
It's true.
That's right. I love her anyway. And she's just as ravishing in person as she is here on the podcast, people. If there's any mystery.
Stop.
Anyway, let's get back to skin though. So, so Keratosis Polaris, check. Vitamin A, definitely worth considering, particularly the preformed. I'll throw this out there as one more thing. You can check vitamin A levels through like LabCorp or Quest. And if you don't have a doctor who's willing to do that for you, you could, unless you live in the state of New York or I believe Rhode Island or maybe Maryland, if you're in any of the other states in the United States, you can actually go to directlabs.com and you can order blood work on your own. And I bet that it would be on their menu if you wanted to do it that way. But I've done high dose vitamin A with a lot of people over the years, typically like my much more inflamed or autoimmune people. And we're trying to get like an autoimmune situation into remission again, like a Crohn's, colitis, something like that.
Right.
And vitamin A can be toxic if you take too much of it. So you want to be a little bit careful when you're doing heroic dosing like I have done. But I'll just send people out to LabCorp and they have a little mini panel and it's beta carotene and vitamin A in the same little mini panel. And I'll just order that. And I have seen some people where their beta carotene is through the roof and their vitamin A is either normal or low. And I don't bother running the genetic stuff on people anymore because I haven't found it to be that earth shattering. And frankly, I find a lot of people like hook into it too much and they get really freaked out by the genetic stuff and they think that they're doomed. So I don't really do the SNPs and the 23andMe's and the MTHFRs and all of that anymore. But I'll usually mention it to people. If I see that pattern on the labs, I'll go, oh, just FYI, you look like a person who doesn't do this conversion really well. So you'd actually benefit from taking some cod liver oil or getting vitamin A, like real vitamin A through an animal-based source. And I'll mention a fair amount of us Caucasian people just don't make that conversion really well. It's a genetic thing that's common in like our race, and it is what it is. But you can measure it. So if you're doubtful, if you want a little bit more data to support your hypothesis or for tracking purposes before you start taking a vitamin A supplement, you could do that. But to throw out an absurd number, the reason why I track and I do that with people when I do the doses that I'm describing, when you've taken a vitamin A supplement for KP, like what dose have you done? Do you remember off the top of your head?
I don't know. I don't think I took anything astronomical. I kind of took things maybe for a longer period of time at like a maybe slightly higher dose, maybe like 20,000 IU, something like that, 10,000 IU. I can't remember exact dosage, something around there. I've
used products that are like little soft gels, and Vital Nutrients has some. One of them I think is 25,000 IU, and one of them's like 12.5 thousand IU.
Right.
To put it in perspective, I want to communicate how safe I think vitamin A actually is. I have dosed people as high as 250,000 in a single day, and then I start dropping them gradually. So we'll go like 250, 200, 150, 150, and then I'll land them at a maintenance dose of like 25 for a while.
Yep.
But when you're trying to stomp down really nasty inflammation or an autoimmune thing and really calm things down quickly, you might consider a heroic dose, but I would not do that without monitoring labs first and during that. But again, like I just want to paint the picture that vitamin A supplementation is actually really safe in my experience. I think a lot of people will read on the internet like, oh, vitamin A could be toxic if you take too much. And then they'll shy away from taking vitamin A supplements and they'll try to do like the carrots and stuff instead. But again, knock on wood, I've been doing these high doses with people for years, and I've never once tipped anybody near the toxicity limit for vitamin A.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, with vitamin A, it probably comes down to the synergy of other things. So like, I think vitamin D becomes important too. So you might want to like have some, take vitamin D in conjunction.
Zinc.
But I do think, you bring up an interesting point just in the overall skin conversation. There's a couple different points to mention. One, again, a lot of these skin conditions like, eczema or psoriasis more so, I think, and like more of the autoimmune skin conditions, you might want to consider things like nutrition and like things that are going to balance inflammation and your immune function. Now, like stuff like the microbiome's a part of that. But
sure.
I think we also discussed this a little bit, maybe in a recent episode about like
all disease begins in the gut.
All disease begins in the gut. Yeah, we did. Has that? I don't know if that's been released or what, but we did an episode that was entitled that. But I think in the gut health space, there seems to be this mentality of like, ooh, if I just fix dysbiosis, my skin stuff will go away. And it's like, well, not if you're vitamin A deficient or you don't eat enough omega-3s, or like there's different things that might help regulate inflammation better in your body. And again, like if you have autoimmunity, there's going to be other things that are going to affect immune function, like stress. So again, I think it's just very short-sighted to be like, it's a microbiome issue. The other thing I will mention about that too is like why some of the same breakdowns that might be causing the microbiome issue are also could be causing the skin issue. So they might be more associated than actually
correlation,
like causal.
Not causation.
Right. So that's really important to acknowledge because again, if there's stress or nutrient deficiencies or kind of runaway inflammation, like all of those things could be affecting the microbiome. And again, like that could then affect the skin. Like everything's connected, but I think just to say like there's a linear line of like if you have dysbiosis, it's causing the skin thing, and unless you fix the dysbiosis, like you're screwed, is sort of the mentality that I see. It's like a very linear thing, and I just don't think it's linear. I think that it's much more of a web of different things that could be driving the skin stuff. The microbiome could, again, like make things worse. And gut stuff can certainly make things worse, and immune dysregulation worse, but it's a piece of the puzzle, not the whole puzzle.
Well, and another kind of way to picture it that we've talked about many times before is that of a pie chart. So could microbiome stuff or leaky gut or like gut-based stuff be a slice of the pie? Absolutely. Is it the entire pie? Probably not.
Yeah. It reminds me of, I had this client, and again, honestly, her symptoms weren't bad. She didn't have very many gut symptoms, but she had like almost like this weird rash on her belly that was not going away. She was working with me and another provider. The other provider was much more skin focused. And again, like her goal was to kind of help with the skin stuff, but I was kind of approaching it in a slightly different way. But she had been getting like GI map work done, things like that done. And the provider was like, I think you have H. pylori, but the GI map didn't have H. pylori. And
it didn't show it, you mean?
Yeah.
They tested it for it, but it tested negative.
Tested negative for H. pylori. But she didn't really have any major symptoms of H. pylori either. So I was like, this is just weird to assume that she has H. pylori. So I was sort of along the lines of like, oh no, I think I would just, work on fortifying your immune system. Like, let's work on lifestyle stuff. I think we were adjusting like her workouts a little bit. We were working on her diet. So there was a number of things we were working on. And I'm like, I might just continue with those things for a little bit longer and kind of see how everything unfolds. But again, I think she got persuaded, which again, I'm never going to be like, you have to listen to me. I'm not going to be that provider. I think you have to sort of like go with what you feels best. And she was like, oh, I think I'm going to go this H. pylori route. So she treats the H. pylori and it doesn't do anything. And then the provider goes, well, it must be a parasite then. There were no parasites on the GI map. In the parasite cleanse was, of course, like a 4-month full-blown, what's the company? No, my pregnancy brain. The popular one, Cellcore. Yeah,
Cellcore.
So it was like a 3-month or 4-month Cellcore thing. And I'm like, oh, I was just kind of like, oh man, I don't think you need to be doing this if you don't have any parasites showing up and you don't really have any symptoms of parasites. Like, it was just bizarre, but I think to me, it's like, it's very indicative. This provider in particular's approach was very indicative of what I think I see in the functional space at times, where it's so locked in on the skin thing having to be a microbiome issue and not
and
kind
the
of
boogeyman hunt. Like
Right,
there's
the
a
boogeyman
bad
hunt.
thing that we need to kill
Right.
and we need to find the enemy. And it's very like war mentality. Like we're going to get it. We're going to beat it. We're going to starve it.
right. Right.
And yeah, and what drives me nuts about this too is like, why run the test if you're going to ignore, it's like,
Right.
if you know darn well that you're going to treat H. pylori, regardless of what that GI map shows, why did you order the test?
Right.
Like that just boggles my mind when people behave that way. It's like, okay, clearly you have a set protocol, a set way of thinking, and you're not really taking the person's like context into the picture
Right.
here. You're going to do your protocol no matter what. And I think that it sounds like that provider was really grasping at straws.
Well,
right?
yeah,
Like,
I
it must be
again,
this.
I think it's already very tempting for clients to get sucked in on the microbiome piece. But I think as a provider, I mean, the best providers are the ones that I think that can kind of like zoom you out a little bit when you're too zoomed in. And again, I just think most of where people start going wrong a little bit is just assuming like, ooh, if I just address my microbiome, I'm good, instead of like, ooh, why, even if the microbiome is imbalanced, well, why? I need to like maybe get a little bit of an understanding of that in order to solve the problem, instead of just like nuking the microbiome and calling it good and being like, oh, here we go. And I think, to be fair, some people, again, who treat their gut, whether it's like they do like a SIBO treatment or something, they might really notice positive benefits in their skin because, again, maybe reducing some of their sketchy bugs helps kind of balance things out for a little bit. But again, it's more short term if they don't kind of correct the factors that were driving that imbalance to begin with, or kind of rebuild their gut across time. But yeah, I think that gets a little bit hard to, it creates more of that feedback loop of like, ooh, I treated my gut and my skin got better.
Yeah.
Ooh, it must be the microbiome. And it's like, well, maybe it is, but maybe that's a big part of the symptomology, and like it drives some of the symptoms. But you still need to try to figure out like why there was so much imbalance. And maybe it was something like a big course of antibiotics or something, but you need to kind of rebuild things and think about things holistically.
Well, again, it's getting to the root of the root of the root, right?
Right.
It's okay. The root cause of the skin problem could be SIBO or leaky gut or whatever, but you still have to trace back one more step and ask, well, why did I get SIBO? Or why did I get leaky gut? And, we've said this before. We've worked with people. I know I have. I've worked with people who have done rifaximin 10 times and then SIBO comes back for the 11th time. And they're scratching their head. And it's like, well, because you've only treated the SIBO. You've only nuked it and starved it. And you've done nothing or little to nothing for the reasons why you developed SIBO in the first place. And again, it's getting back to the root of the root of the root. And I did a YouTube video on this not that long ago, maybe in the last calendar year or so. I did a video about autoimmunity, where I painted this idea of there only being one root cause of autoimmunity. And then I talk about like the roots kind of underneath that main root. And I think I've said this in the podcast before, but I still stand by. I think that there's only a very small number of true root causes when you get down to it. And it could be any symptom, any disease process. Really, you're looking at the same 5 or so things. Nutrition. And by that, we mean nutritional adequacy. So do you have enough vitamins and minerals and fiber and protein and carbs and fat and calories coming into your body to fuel you? Sleep, movement. There's a big umbrella for like mental health, stress, all of that kind of wadded up into one. And then, I think that those are the 4 most important ones. And then you could loosely throw in another one for like exposure to stuff.
Right.
So that could be toxic chemical garbage. The poor people in Flint, Michigan with the lead in their water, that would absolutely do weird things to your body if you're exposed to something like that, or if you're living in a blatantly moldy place.
Right.
That's absolutely going to do things to you. You could even think exposure to something like antibiotics, exposure,
like an acute infection or something that throws
your system
off.
And then I would say the last one would be something infectious. So, you drink creek water like a knucklehead and you give yourself a parasite.
Who did that?
Nobody that we know. No. Mm-mm. Go back to episode 1 if you want that story, people.
Who was it with you? Was it a girl named Jane or something?
Jill. You have a good memory.
Okay,
yes.
Jill told you to drink the creek water and you were just wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and didn't know any better.
We were silly gooses together. All right. The condensed version of the story is my freshman year of college. I was a rower and we went out practicing in the middle of the afternoon and it was hotter than all blazes. And Jill and I both downed our water bottle within 5 or 10 minutes of leaving the dock. And we were parched and we're at practice and we are looking over the side of the boat. We're like, oh, the water looks so pristine and beautiful and clean. I bet we could drink that. And every single one of our teammates and our coach, all in unison, told us, no, don't do it, you knuckleheads. And here's the thing that sold me. I was this close anyway, because I was so thirsty. And then Jill goes, because one of our teammates said, do you know how dirty that water is? And Jill says, and I quote, it's a natural kind of dirty. And that was enough to sell me on it, boy. So we took our BPA riddled Nalgene water bottles, 2004 people, don't judge us. But we took our BPA filled Nalgene water bottles and dunked them in the Tonawanda Creek and we cheersed and we chugged that Nalgene down and it was so refreshing. We were very pleased with ourselves until we got very sick about a day and a half later.
Yeah.
Oh,
God. Didn't you pass out or something and then get Tums in lemonade or something so you could compete?
So we did this immediately before our biggest race of the year. It was the end of the year and we were going for our biggest race. And we had to get to the bus at like 6 a.m. or something to get down to Philadelphia. And so I had puked all night and I had dehydrated myself severely, apparently. So when I woke up in the morning and I walked down the hall to go splash some water on my face and use the bathroom and get ready to go, I passed out. And I hit my head on the way down on the wall. And my teammate who I was staying with came running because I'm 6 feet tall, man. I go down, you're going to hear it. I'm not a petite woman. So she heard the thud and came running and I couldn't see. I was totally blacked out. Could not see anything for a good 10 minutes. It was
It's
scary.
Wild you still competed. Where they're like, shuffle you under the bus. Nothing to see here.
I have I'm still a little bit resentful that happened in retrospect. I didn't think about it until many years later, but I absolutely had a concussion and they slapped me on the team bus and had me compete anyway. And in our defense, we kicked ass and we won that race. So, was it worth it? I don't know. You be the judge of that. But I have a shiny gold medal from the dad veil to prove it. But it is kind of weird. In retrospect, they should have taken me to get checked out because I could have had a brain bleed or something really, really quite serious from falling like that. But we got me to the bus and immediately, as soon as we saw Jill, we figured out what happened because she was sick all night also. And everybody on the whole team razzed us for the entire trip. We never lived it down. All those years later, we never lived it down. And, we were quarantined to the front of the bus. We had to sit behind the head coach, who was a little old man, and he gave us pink lemonade and Tums the entire way to Philadelphia.
Oh, God. As if it couldn't get any worse.
I know.
Worse trauma for your poor body.
I know. Yeah, let's suppress your stomach acid now. Yeah.
And then give you tons of sugar.
That's that's such an old man thing to do. Here, have a Tums.
Exactly. Here's a Tums and some lemonade.
Yep. Yeah. So I appreciate the hydration efforts, at least. The Tums, we'll leave that now. But But yes, but like I said, we were the proud champions of the May 2005 Dadvale Regatta. We kicked ass. Nobody was even close to coming near us.
Wow.
And it was, yes, we were very proud. Thank you. But anyway, let's get back to skin. So, all right. So acne, KP, covered that reasonably well. Let's shift a little bit to eczema and psoriasis. And I think we can actually combine these to some extent or another for a little bit of the conversation, because these are two symptoms or two conditions that are associated with immune, I guess we could loosely call it immune imbalance of some sort, or it's immune mediated at least. But it's two different flavors of immune mediated skin disease, right? Mm-hmm. So we've got psoriasis, which is an autoimmune condition. Like that's been a known thing. Autoimmune, your immune system is erroneously attacking your skin and causing that symptom. Versus eczema, it's still immune mediated, but I know I've heard people kind of loosely throw around that eczema might be autoimmune. But what I've seen much more of is that eczema is in that umbrella of like allergic conditions. So start thinking of things like histamine, start thinking things like Th2 dominance, and it tends to clump together and be associated with other allergic conditions. So oftentimes, not always, you'll see that people with eczema have other allergic symptoms or other allergic diseases, right? So like, oh, they have some anaphylactic food allergies, or they have really wicked seasonal allergies, or a lot of like phlegm and mucus and, you know, like maybe they get hives more easily than other people. Maybe they have, you know, like acid reflux that's really triggered by higher histamine foods.
Esophagitis, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, EOE, like maybe even mast cell disease. But you kind of see this family, this clump of allergic stuff, and eczema is pretty firmly in that clump versus autoimmune disease, which is a little bit different.
Right.
But things that would be good for the immune system would be good for either of these conditions, right? So like, you know, making sure that you're well nourished, getting enough sleep.
The true root causes you had mentioned before.
Yes, that's the thing. When you get down to it, I feel like so much of this work is actually very simple. It's coaching human beings that's hard.
Right.
Not all of y'all are coachable, to be quite honest. So that's the trick.
And I think the skin is harder because the turnover can take longer. So like people in the gut health space, I think, have to be patient too. And there's sometimes some things that can, if you're having gut symptoms, that can help you more quickly. Not in every case. Again, like sometimes I really think that, you know, maybe someone gets a little bit of help with like a prokinetic or an enzyme or something, but really the thing that's going to take them 80% of the way symptom-wise are other things. Like they're so nutritionally compromised that prokinetics can only take them so far, or enzymes or something can only take them so far. But, you know, I think the hard thing about skin is that there's not really anything that's going to like acutely shift, except maybe like there could be some topical things, but still, like from a root causal standpoint, I mean, you're going to probably have to bide your time and wait like at least from starting something like 3 months to see if it does much skin wise. At the very minimum, I think most people have to wait longer than that to sort of see some shifts skin wise. So that's a tricky part, I think, in terms of coaching people around skin, is that sometimes you really don't get as much feedback until you're kind of a ways into working on skin stuff. Yeah. And I think there's also this layer with skin stuff where it's on the skin. Yeah. It's right there. And so there's a part of it that's tangled up in it that like people feel very self-conscious about the skin. And they're hesitant to maybe go out and do things if they have acne or eczema or psoriasis and they feel like icky and ashamed. And that, as a side note, like
the conversation you have with your body about your body is super important. Mm-hmm. So if you are finding yourself feeling ashamed or disgusted by or very frustrated with or disappointed with your body, that's not going to be super conducive to healing. So actually like working on the relationship you have with your body and learning to love your body despite any and all of its flaws, like that can be part of the journey for a lot of people. But I find that that's a big part of the skin piece.
Well, and I will say too, like to that point, I think it's okay at times to be like frustrated with where your skin's at or where your gut's at. It's like, it's more if you just stay there.
Yeah.
So like to me, I think that there's a slight difference. Like, you know, if you have, you know, a period of time where your skin's worse or your gut's worse, like it can be like, oh man, this is like not fun to deal with and this kind of sucks. And I'm a bit frustrated where I'm at and even like frustrated with my body. But like you could have that for, you know, a short blip of time. But if you're there day in, day out, like
consumed,
hooking into those feelings, that's I think where it gets problematic. There has to be kind of a balance with how you view your body. And I think, again, it's a really good point to bring up, like how you're talking, your self-talk, coming at it from like a compassionate lens, I think could be really helpful. Because even if you are frustrated, you can kind of like give yourself some love during that period of time. And I think it kind of helps you move through those feelings better if you are frustrated.
Yeah. Well, it's like a child or an animal, right? Like if you come home and you find that your dog pooped on your couch, you're going to be upset with them and frustrated with them. And that's perfectly reasonable for you to feel that way, but you get over it pretty quickly, right? Like at least I pray. I hope that you're not the kind of person listening to this right now. Like I hope that our audience is not the kind of person who would actually like take it out on the dog and like hold a grudge for weeks and months on end and let that like consume their relationship with their dog, right? Like you can get pissed at them. You can rub their little nose in it. You can, you know, you're going to clean up the poop. You're going to be, you know, you're going to call your best friend and be like, you're never going to believe what Barney did today. Oh my God, this is crazy. And you can rant about it a little bit, but like the next day you get over it and you move on with your life. Right. And you still love your dog or you still love your child, even if they did something to disappoint you. And I feel like we need to cultivate more of that with our body, like loving our body and still allowing ourselves to be kind of transiently disappointed in certain elements of our body and its function.
Yeah, I think like the thing about like self-compassion and being loving is not that it just like you don't ever go through hard times or you don't ever like, you know, feel disappointment. It's more like, oh, I can feel these emotions and it's safe to feel these emotions and I can kind of support myself through these emotions without trying to change the situation. Because I think what happens too is when people are hooking into like, oh, my skin's horrible today, I need to try like the next new thing. It kind of feeds into that cycle a lot of times. It's like the desperation to get rid of the feeling sort of fuels some of the urgent behavior of like, oh, I need to try a new skincare routine because my skin's really bad, or like I need to fix it, instead of being like, I'm just gonna let kind of my skin be for a minute and like acknowledge that right now I'm kind of moving through a difficult time and I'm gonna like love my body by nourishing it and all this, nourishing it and building resilience. But that's not necessarily going to change right away. So I think the same thing goes for like gut symptoms too. Like if you have gut symptoms, sometimes just like acknowledging that they're not going to shift with quick fixy type things, looking more long term and kind of giving yourself some like love and support during the times where you feel uncomfortable physically or mentally, I think is key. But yeah, it's a tricky headspace to get out of. But again, I think truly it's very important. I think mindset tends to be like probably the biggest make or break issue for people.
Well, and can I interrupt you for a quick second on that, actually? Because I have an example of this. So I think mindset, but also just like mental health, stress, all of this kind of folds into that thing that I mentioned. And I had an example of this. So there was a woman who wanted to work with me because she had very bad eczema, and it was really, really flared up. And so she was very desperate to get the eczema under control. And she found me because she assumed it was gut-based and she wanted to do things, holistically and naturally. So she came to me. I had some pretty strong suspicions at the beginning that there was a very strong mental health stress component to her case. And I think I might have mentioned this briefly in one of the episodes we're going to post later that we did together in Cincinnati. But she came to me, and one of the things that came up is that she was working 2 jobs and she had not given herself even a single day off in 3 years. Tres años. Like, bonkers. Not even one day. Not even like
You've been really
one lazy
speaking
Sunday.
Spanish a lot today.
I know. I feel like very inspired. I don't know what it is about this co-working space. But that was automatically a big red flag in my mind. But I think she wanted to like buy a house or something, and she was saving up, and she was like, no, I've just got to keep going. I've got to keep going. And I was like, all right. Then at the time I was doing more testing than I currently am because I don't know, I sipped enough of the Kool-Aid. I thought that these tests were accurate and reliable, but didn't know any better. And I remember we ordered probably a GI map. I don't remember the stool test, but probably a GI map at the time, and an oat test because, again, I thought that was a good way to evaluate for Candida. Now I know better. But we were in that phase where we did the first appointment. I sent her home with the collection kits, and she collected the samples and mailed them in. But then it takes like 2 weeks for those to turn back results for you. And virtually 99.99% of my patients are fine waiting those 2 weeks. It might not be ideal. Of course, they would want the results sooner than that, but they just understand like it is what it is. She was coming unglued, like really, really, really unglued in that 2 week span of time. And she was kind of starting to allude to suicidal thoughts.
Whoa.
She didn't come out and say it, but she said, for example, that she wished that she could be put into a medically induced coma for 2 weeks while we waited for the results.
Oh,
yeah.
My goodness. Okay.
And there was another one that I was like, ugh. And so again, like, here's this person who I think is probably way more burnt out and stressed than she realizes. And then like she can't even cope with a 2 week waiting period to get test results back. And she's kind of throwing that stuff out there. And so I was kind of like babysitting her a little bit in those 2 weeks, making sure that she was okay. And then her results came back and we felt we had reason to try to treat Candida. So we did like a Candida protocol. I feel like maybe it helped a little bit here or there. Like it was kind of questionable, but she cut way down on sugar and kind of cleaned up her diet in general. And we had her on some supplements. But you know what actually seemed to help her the most, from my recollection at least?
What?
She resolved. Thank you. She was moving through a really bad breakup, and she finally got some of her shit back from her ex-boyfriend. So that was one big step for her. And around the same time, she got a puppy. And she became obsessed with the puppy, and she like brought him to the office so I could meet him. It was so fun. But it was around that time where she was kind of finally resolving the loose ends of a really difficult, messy breakup. And she got a puppy and was spending all of her time with the puppy. And she started to do much better. And I worked with her probably 6 years ago, so I don't remember exactly her case now. But I think last I knew she was doing really well, and we had her on an adaptogen blend, because after that happened, I was like, ooh, okay, this is an excuse for me to go this angle a little bit more aggressively. Right. But yeah, like we tried to treat the Candida that may or may not have been there because we were basing it on an oat and a GI map. So, but we tried to treat the Candida and clean up her gut, and that maybe helped a questionable amount, but it was doing things for her mental health that actually ultimately helped her the most.
Right. And who knows too, if not having a day off for 3 years and like dealing with a toxic relationship was actually the driver of if there was candida present or if there was imbalances present. Like, I think that's the root of the root, as we've been talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's wild. Yeah, but again, it's so interesting stuff like that because, or again, when someone goes on vacation and they're like, "Oh, my symptoms went away," and it's like, "Ooh, let's explore that, please."
Yeah.
But I know we talked about that at a recent episode too.
Yeah. And I'll throw this out there too on the topic of eczema. Because again, like I said, eczema is in the family of allergic conditions. So there is some likelihood that treating with that kind of an angle would be beneficial. So if people want to explore that a little bit more, we have several episodes talking about histamine, mast cells, Th2 dominance, allergies, that sort of stuff. 2 of them were really recent. If you go back just like 3 episodes, it was episode 189 and 190. We just did 2 back-to-back episodes on what a low histamine diet would look like. So go check those out if you haven't done so already. And then I think you might have to go back a whole year to find some of our other histamine stuff. But if you search the podcast for histamine or mast cell as a keyword, you should be able to turn up at least a couple of videos. And then I have some on my YouTube channel as well. So if you go to the Gut Microbiome Queen channel on YouTube, I have even more there. But yeah, I think with eczema, again, like it's the foundational roots, the sleep, stress, movement, nutrition, mental health, maybe overt exposures and infections, like certainly work through all of those.
Yeah.
If there's any,
I would say even look for like any true food allergies too. Could be kind of interesting to rule out as well. But again, I just wanted to throw that one out there.
Particularly with eczema. Yeah.
Right.
And then if there's a little bit more specific stuff to be done for eczema, you could take more of that like histamine allergic angle. So something like quercetin or vitamin C could be really beneficial. With psoriasis, again, you want to do things that are good for the immune system. So all of the foundational things we just rattled off: sleep, stress, movement, nutrition, etc. But you could have more of the angle or like add an additional layer for trying to calm down the autoimmunity more directly. So as I mentioned before, higher doses of vitamin A, as long as you're monitoring your levels or preferably working with a provider, something like that could be helpful. Vitamin D, you could do a loading dose with vitamin D potentially if you're really low as well. And even things like glutathione or maybe butyrate, like all of these things help stimulate T regulatory cells and kind of calm down that autoimmune fire. And then you could get at whatever other roots you need to dig at. There's one more thing, and I think that you have more knowledge on this than I do, so I'm going to pick your brain here for a minute. There was one paper that I saw years back looking at psoriasis, and they had the person take ox bile. It was some sort of like bile promoting something. I would have to dig to find that paper again, but it was an ox bile supplement and maybe quercetin ? And something else. And they got some pretty good results with psoriasis. Now, the only thing I can think of is like maybe they were absorbing their fats and their fat soluble vitamins better. Maybe there was an antimicrobial effect from the bile in the small intestine. So maybe hinting at a link with SIBO. But what do you make of that? I know I think you're more into the bile world than I am, perhaps. So I'm curious what you think of that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Again, I think both your theories could potentially be a factor in why it could have been successful. I think too, like ox bile can sometimes dissolve any gallbladder sludge too. So like, again, in terms of bile flow, helping with that. It'd be interesting to know the exact mechanism or why it would help. But I think there is a couple different things that could be at play. And again, your hypotheses are probably as good as mine in terms of what could be at play there.
And
But yeah.
interestingly, I just did a really quick Google search on it. I literally typed in bile psoriasis to see what would pop up. And there was an article. So the article was from UC Davis. And they said psoriasis, which causes itchy, painful scales and red patches on the skin, is linked to the body's immune system. The study published in the Journal of Investigative Dermatology suggests that bile acids may treat psoriasis by stopping immune T cells from producing a pro-inflammatory protein known as IL-17A and blocking the immune cell movement to the inflammation site. So I don't remember that part of the study, but apparently they linked it with IL-17A, which is to oversimplify a complex system, you have like the Th2, Th1 seesaw that's constantly at odds with each other. And you have a separate seesaw, which is the Th17 pro-inflammatory cells. They tend to be more associated with like autoimmunity and cancer and inflammatory disorders. And then you have the anti-inflammatory Treg cells that are basically telling the rest of the immune system to shush, like, relax, guys, you're fine. And they are sort of on a seesaw together. So what they are suggesting here is that you can start to calm down that inflammatory side and calm down those Th17 cells. But what I had rattled off, things like vitamin A, vitamin D, butyrate, and glutathione, those things are working on the opposite end of the seesaw, and they're trying to promote or boost T regulatory cells. But the net effect on the seesaw is going to be similar. You're trying to raise up the good side and lower down the quote unquote bad side.
Right.
But yeah, bile acids, maybe it has a direct effect on the immune system, or again, maybe it's, they're absorbing their fat soluble nutrients better, or you have an antimicrobial effect in a population of people who might have SIBO, and then it helps balance or treat SIBO or dysbiosis in the small bowel, and then that calms down the immune system. But interesting study and interesting little extra layer to throw in for people with psoriasis in particular. So yeah, I thought that's neat.
It is neat.
I have one little resource to share, I think, and then I think we might have exhausted all of my knowledge on this topic. How about you?
Yeah, I know. Again, I don't think either of us are necessarily skin experts, but I think
we have skin.
We do have skin. We are
quite a bit of it.
We are wearing a skin suit.
That's right. Yes, but
like
again,
it's a horrifying image. But okay.
We have worked with this clinically, though.
Right.
So again, and like Amy said, she has had Keratosis Polaris. She's had acne as part of her gut healing journey. So like she has a little bit more direct experience than I even do. But I think we both have worked with people with these conditions enough times that, you know, but I certainly hope this was a valuable episode. But I just recommended something to a patient fairly recently, and I thought I'd throw this in there at the end of the episode. Hashtag not sponsored, for the record. There's an essential oil company that I've used on and off for a number of years. It's called Nature's Gift. So like a present from nature, Nature's Gift. I think their website is just naturesgift.com. If you go to their search bar on their website and type in the word eczema or psoriasis, you'll pull up a few different things. So they have a lot of typed out information about the essential oils that they sell, and like a little narrative, oh, here's what it could help with. So you'll bring up any of the oils that they mentioned psoriasis or eczema for, depending on the search that you use. Also, they have a carrier oil sample pack. And I forget how many are in there, but there's like 10 different carrier oils, and they made little like 2-ounce sample bottles, and they'll send you all of them. I forget what it is. It's like $30 or $40 or something, but that way you could try, you know, maybe your skin doesn't really love coconut oil, but maybe it loves jojoba oil or almond oil, or I'm trying to think what the other ones would be, but they have a collection of their carrier oils, and they bundled them into a little sample packet. And that way you could play and like mix and match and determine which of the carrier oils really agree with your skin. And then if you wanted to try out some of the essential oils on top of that, you certainly could. But yeah, Nature's Gift, that actually is a pretty good resource. And I've had some people get that before and really liked that, that experience of kind of like speed dating topical stuff for their skin.
Yeah. Yeah, I know sometimes that can be really interesting and tricky. I had a client who was reacting to coconut. Like she found a mild allergy. She basically has a mild allergy and was noticing her skin didn't look quite right for like the last couple years, but like didn't really necessarily hook into it too much. But then when she did an allergy test, she was like, oh, wait, all my skin products have coconut oil. And she took them out and noticed like a fairly decent change in her skin. But her reference point had just kind of slowly shifted to maybe being a little bit more inflamed. So it wasn't just like a super high priority or anything.
Yeah.
But it was very interesting. I think that coconut oil is so prevalent in a lot of the natural skin products now.
Definitely in the last 15 years or so. I think coconut and cauliflower are both experiencing a renaissance of sorts. Like people are super into coconut everything and cauliflower everything. You know, cauliflower rice, potatoes,
pizza crust. Yeah,
pizza crust. Yeah, if cauliflower could become a pizza crust, you could do anything you set your mind to. You hear me out there in the world? Like you could do it. I don't care if it's healing your gut or going to the moon. You could do it. Little inspirational moment on the IBS Freedom podcast. But I'm glad that you brought that up actually too, because I have a friend / colleague from grad school, and you know he has like 3 or 4 children now. I have a kid. He went to school for 1,000,000 years longer than me, and now he's like a nurse practitioner. But we catch up very occasionally, like once every couple of years. We'll catch up on the phone, and I remember he was saying that one of his older 2 children has pretty bad eczema, and they figured out that that child was sensitive to coconut, and they were using coconut oil, you know, as a moisturizer. Like, oh, it doesn't have any preservatives or chemicals. It's just coconut oil, so it's going to be good. And the kid's skin really did not like coconut oil, and it took them a while to figure out that that was one of the driving factors. And here they thought they were doing something wonderful for the kid's skin. But yeah, there are many different oils and carrier oils that can be helpful for the skin, and they can moisturize the skin. Coconut might work for you. It might not. But like I said, Nature's Gift, they have that little bundle that you can go through, and you can kind of speed date them and see which one you land on. And then, like I said, there's probably numerous essential oils that they have on their website. And then you could add like a drop or 2 of the essential oil to your carrier oil and make your own DIY concoction.
Yeah, I will say there's another, and I honestly cannot remember the brand, but some of the more like highfalutin bars of soap that you can buy are like goat milk and maybe olive oil based, but very few other ingredients. So if you do notice that your skin's sensitive to like topical things, I've historically just liked some of these bars in the past. I don't necessarily think I have super sensitive skin to like soaps or fragrances, but I have recommended it to a few patients with more sensitive skin, and they've noticed, you know, like if they can just boil down the ingredients to like goat milk, which actually is fairly higher in vitamin A, like it has some of the minerals that could potentially be helpful for skin. And like an olive oil base versus a coconut oil base could be a little bit better tolerated. Coconut tends to be a more common allergen than like olive oil. I don't know if I've ever heard of an olive oil.
It's technically a tree nut, isn't it?
Yeah. Coconut, again, I think is a fairly common allergy. So again, I think that it's, if you notice that your skin is sensitive to some of those things, sometimes again, just boiling it down to like something fairly simple without coconut. Yeah.
And I'll throw this out there as one more thing is, so we're talking about a form of restriction, right? We're talking about cutting out products that have certain ingredients and like doing allergy testing and that sort of stuff. And that could be super useful and super helpful in the short term. Now, I don't think it's harmful for somebody to cut out coconut oil-based skin products, right? Versus cutting something out of the diet. If you cut something out of the diet for a prolonged period of time, you're almost certainly missing out on nutrients. and experiences that you otherwise could enjoy. But, just simply switching to a different brand of shampoo or conditioner or whatever, okay, you might pay more for it because you're getting this bougie 2-ingredient soap, but otherwise there's not a lot of harm in doing what we're talking about. But I will say this, I think that it's entirely possible that some people could restrict in this way and kind of whittle down or clean up their skincare routine for a period of time. And then they might find that they can reintroduce some more normal or mainstream skincare stuff down the road. And it's that idea of building resiliency and building health. And the closer you get to optimum health, the more resilient your body is, the more likely it is that your immune system and your body is going to tolerate this stuff. And your immune system isn't going to lose its ever-loving mind when you put a little bit of coconut oil on your skin. Right. So by all means, you could restrict, you can change your soaps and your products and your lotions and your topicals for the time being, but also try not to get too frustrated or disheartened by doing that. And I don't think that you're doomed to pay twice as much for soap for the rest of your days. You could very well get to a place where you could do other topical things. It just might take you a few years to get there, and really nurturing your body and showing your body and your immune system that you're safe enough to do that. So just final
food for thought.
Yes, food for thought indeed, here on the IBS Freedom Podcast. Well, Amy, I am surprised. Here I thought that two gals like us who are gut gurus and we're not necessarily skin experts, I thought this was going to be a short episode, but look, I was wrong. We ended up ratchet jawing for quite a bit, rabbit trails included. I hope that everybody who has skin benefited from listening to this episode. I mean, I hope and pray to God that everybody listening has skin. That'd be terrifying to think of a pile of meat listening to us right now. With that imagery, I'm going to bid you adieu. So goodbye, all of you skin-wearing people. We will see you in the next episode of the IBS Freedom Podcast. Toodaloo.